Besides, the Fed head Jerome Powell warned that the US economy is still gonna go through some very difficult months. It makes sense to assume that the stock price already contains $908 billion now, and then even more liquidity. Welcome to the Coin Post. You'll see for yourself how big the US stock market bubble looks, especially if you look at the S&P 500 index. But to realize the full scale of the problem, we should look at Warren Buffett indicator, which shows market cap to the GDP ratio in the US. However, it doesn't prevent the stock market from rising, and Buffett himself made several large purchases this year, both in the US and abroad, and even took part in a very profitable IPO. As a result, the situation is pretty unclear. The economy is weaker than ever, the stock market is horribly overvalued, the world is ravaged by the pandemic. Still, stock prices continue to rise. Obviously, this can't go on forever and the market should be corrected. But when? What if not buying today means we're losing profit because markets are gonna keep rising for a while? So today I suggest looking at the processes which are going to happen in December and how they can ensure the stock market against a new collapse and help it hit new records. And if you want all the following things to happen, give us a thumbs up right now. Let's dive in. Let's start with the main December trend, which already pushed stock prices to new highs and can now accelerate the process. It's the beginning of a massive coronavirus vaccination, which could begin in just a few days in the US. According to recent data, there are nearly 65 million COVID-19 cases in the world. The US continues to hold the lead in both the number of cases and the identification of new cases. They attribute this to the fact that they do more tests daily than other countries. This explanation makes total sense and raises the question of the actual number of infected people in the world if all countries were to perform the same amount of testing. The US is the first to begin mass vaccination, and there are certain nuances here. Even their resources are not sufficient to carry out this process as soon as possible. So there is no miracle cure, and it's possible that at the beginning the number of cases is gonna increase. Besides, the Fed head Jerome Powell warned that the US economy is still gonna go through some very difficult months until the COVID-19 issue is over. It's also worth mentioning that the vaccine from Pfizer and other companies, with all their clinical trials, were put among the top quite early. This has various implications for the future, like the efficacy of mass vaccination could be very different from that of clinical tests. But that's one thing, because another is there was too little time and there's a risk that the vaccine will have undetected side effects. I want you to know that this is not a call against vaccines, no, it's a fight against the virus. But we run such a risk, and we have no idea how effective the vaccine will be, how it affects our health in the long term. Moreover, there could be a new virus mutation for which this vaccine will prove powerless. I know the picture looks terrifying and the topic of the video is the market rise. I mean, all the bad stuff won't happen within months, or may never happen. Specifically in December, we're likely to hear victorious statements by politicians that the days of the virus are numbered, and as of January 1st, the US economy will literally explode with growth. The US election was the hottest topic last month, and I had to deal with some misunderstanding from Donald Trump supporters. Simply put, I even got a few comments about fake news, while I always include primary sources, and Trump's Twitter too. I realize that no one likes to hear bad news about the candidate they support, but I share real news and show the real picture, and just because you don't like it, it's not gonna change. So the main day for the US, and let's just say for the whole world, is December 14th, when the Electoral College votes. In my previous videos I told you that Trump promised to resign the presidency if the electorate voted for Biden on December 14th. But he continues to insist that the election was a fraud and that he will fight to the last in courts to change the outcome. There's a lot of information that you can find on the net about how the Democrats stole these elections, but I explained it once and I want to repeat it again. The statements of interested parties, Trump's lawyers and members of the Republican Party and all sorts of YouTube vloggers are not evidence. In order for this information to become evidence and influence the outcome, it must be accepted by courts, and Trump hasn't succeeded with those yet. Besides, US Attorney General William Barr says his Justice Department has found no proof to back President Donald Trump's claims of fraud in the 2020 election. He added that he would continue to work and verify the facts of possible falsifications. But based on this info, we can sum up that at this point, it makes sense to assume that the stock price already contains Biden's victory and transfer of power. So if we avoid excesses on December 14th, markets will keep rising. What should really boost the S&P 500 in December is the $900 billion in the form of a second relief package shortly. This is due to the fact that in US politics, the dust settled and Democrats and Republicans are ready to negotiate again. As a result, there is a new draft law that implies allocating $908 billion. It's a compromise option really, and is much less than the Democrats suggested, but they can support it as an emergency, with plans to take another package in 2021 when Biden takes over the White House. More importantly, this is how investors see their draft law. Markets expect to get $908 billion now, and then even more liquidity in the form of $1 trillion or more. If Congress votes for the money before the New Year's Eve, the S&P 500 could reach 3,700 points rapidly, or even go higher. In case they don't give the money again, we may go into correction due to unreasonable expectations. But it's unlikely to be big, because the liquidity crisis is not gonna happen. Markets just want more. And as we can see by the dollar index, which dropped to the level of spring 2018, the printing machine is doing just fine, but the rest of the world is in no hurry to weaken their currencies in return. And it makes no sense because they're damaging their economies. But that's the trend so far. I hope you found this video fascinating and useful for you. Don't you hesitate to give us a thumbs up and share this video with your friends who care about what happens to the stock market in December. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. It's the Coin Post channel. Subscribe and get enlightened.